Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to be talking mostly about the kind of proposals that I have the most experience with, which are things that would be in the ROSES profile. So I'm not going to talk about instruments so much or missions or things like that. I'm going to mostly talk about research and analysis proposals that I've worked on, and with a focus on astrobiology. And if that's not the kind of work you're doing, that's okay. I think there's a lot of general advice in here, but there might be particulars about programs that doesn't really overlap. And you are going to hear a lot of the same things from me that you just heard from Pravel. I wanted to start out with some top tips. And the first thing that you think of when you're ruminating an idea that you want to write a proposal about is why here. So think about the program, the AO that you are responding to. And just like Pravel said, read it really carefully. Make sure that this idea that you have actually fits in the suite of funded projects for that program and responds to that call. A lot of times you might think, oh, this is definitely a solar systems workings proposal, but then as you start reading, you'll be like, actually, this is leaning towards emerging worlds or something like that. And so really try to understand what is the business of that program and why your idea fits in there. Something that can help you there is to look up past funded projects for that program to see if this looks like those, and really try to understand how your work responds to that. The other thing to think about is why now? Is this research needed, and how and why is it needed? And this is a way of demonstrating that this isn't just new knowledge that you're gaining through this work, but that it responds to some need that NASA has. Before I came to Goddard, I did a lot of proposing to museums and foundations and the NSF, and they all have very different priorities, and they like to say they prioritize, for particular things or best science. And the same way here with NASA, be thinking about how this applies to NASA goals. So there's a lot of documents that you could look at to try and tell you what those goals are going to be. There's the decadal process. If you're in astrobiology, there's the astrobiology strategy document. And then also try to think about how your idea would have potential mission relevance. Since a lot of the business of NASA is putting things into space and looking at things that come from space. So try to think how your idea actually applies to that. It's not good enough just to have a really cool idea that will help us understand the universe. For the purposes of funding, it has to fit into a funding profile that exists. The other thing to think about when you're starting to put together this idea, and this is a little bit of something that Prabal talked about, is start workshopping the idea with other people that you know, colleagues. Build on those partnerships so that you're covering the scope of the project with expertise within your group. Something that I like to tell people is to think about the power of the 0.05% FTE. So this means these are people who probably aren't going to be in the lab. They're probably not going to be generating a whole lot of data, but they are there to be your guide on certain topics that you don't have expertise on. And this is really good because a lot of times reviewers will see something and be like, this sounds like a cool idea, but I don't understand who on this proposal is actually knowledgeable enough to guide this research. And that way, by having these extra colleagues there, you can show that you are respectful of that person's discipline and you understand that you may not have that knowledge set they have, and you are including them to be part of the framing of your experimental work. I thought I'd throw out some hints that I've picked up over time. And the first one is the program officer is your friend. Do not think of this as an adversarial relationship. I know that's probably hard if you've gotten a rejection, but the program officer that is there to make sure that the science that they're funding really fits those goals, and they are there to help you succeed if you are funded. And in many respects, they are there to help you to succeed if you aren't funded, because if there was a good idea there, but it wasn't selectable for one reason, they might be able to help you understand, how you failed to get those ideas successfully across to the reviewers. It's really often really beneficial before you start writing to reach out to the program officer and ask if this fits within the scope. It used to be very graceful to do this back at conferences and stuff, and I know this is a little intimidating now because you're basically sending a cold email, but I have never really had an experience where a program officer didn't want to talk about ideas with me. See if they think this is a selectable idea. Is it fitting within the things that they are trying to fund this year? Because remember, just because something is selectable doesn't mean it's selected. It has to be something that meets a funding priority. You can also be their friend by volunteering to be a reviewer. I think this is the single most important thing you can do to start writing really successful proposals is by seeing your competition, seeing what the good ones are, seeing what your fellow reviewers respond to. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then also to echo what Prabal said, learn from your mistakes. Proposals that aren't funded are a really great mechanism for you to go through those reviews seriously and see what you need to change and iterate and make it better. It's all part of the scientific process. Just like we have review on papers, you can think of this the same way for your proposals. Use those reviewers to help you make your ideas better and build on them for the next cycle. The other thing I would say is be honest. Don't lowball anything because your colleagues will know. They know how much it costs. They know how much time it takes. So really be honest with that. I know there's an instinct to be like, oh, can you do the same work on, 20% less time? Can you? So really be honest because it's very disappointing as a reviewer to see a proposal that has a great idea, but they're never going to be able to do it on the time scale they say, and you have to say, no, sorry. The other thing is consider contingency. This was something Prabal mentioned about anticipating questions. Say exactly the problems that are worrying you about your own proposal and how you will address those challenges. Because they're scientists too. They're going to see those kind of side eye parts of your proposal. So meet it head on. Say how you're going to fix any of these things that come along. The other thing is leverage. Nest your projects if you can. Show how this is part of a greater work, part of a body of work that's going to be bigger than just one 3-year grant, something like that. This can also be part of your process of getting feedback from your colleagues. Another thing I would say is really know your institutional resources. I was on a panel once where somebody wanted some, big piece of equipment that was expensive, and that piece of equipment already existed at their institution. And that really looked bad for them on their proposal because it showed they weren't really fitting in with their own organization. And there was probably other gaps there too that became evident. So really know your colleagues, know your institution, and try to make your work fit into a bigger project. I have some do's and don'ts that I thought I'd throw out, and this is very much about the document itself, not necessarily your idea, your relationship with colleagues, or things like this, but this is just for your proposal. First off, don't piss off the reviewer. Like, don't make assumptions about knowledge. Don't cram text into things. Make this easy for them. Just like if you volunteer for a proposal, this is someone who is or for a review, this is someone taking time away from their work to be part of the community process of review. So make their job easy. One of the first things that I think I would point to is something that I like to see as a reviewer and has been really successful for me is a glossary and an acronym key. Every discipline has their own set of acronyms, so make it easy for the reviewer by showing them right at the beginning what these acronyms are, and make it something they can flip back to, not have it buried on the third page the first time you use that acronym or something like that. Have a key. A glossary is also really nice if you're going to be using words in a certain way that maybe people aren't used to. An example would be confidence. If you're talking about statistical scales, show people what your metric for confidence is. The other thing that I would suggest is an executive summary. Have the first page of your document just be kind of an overview of your entire project. And I would say that this is worth an entire page of your proposal because it gives a chance to see a full connection of the work, because that can, once you start digging into the next 14, 29 pages, whatever it is, it can be easy to lose the point of this entire project. Prabal mentioned this, but break up the text. Use bolding, use color boxes, use anything you can to break up the text. This isn't just to make it easy on them because their eyes are tired and they're reading 15 of these things, but this is also a chance for you to really emphasize key information or key goals about your work in a way that It's not buried and they're going to see it. And you're going to really rely on that. How many times have you read a review and said, they didn't understand this? That's the kind of information that you want to pull out of the text and make sure, just hammer it, that people are getting this. The other thing I would say is people love a list. Anytime you can, break it down into a list. Give people something to follow. This makes it easy for a reviewer by the end of it to say, wait a minute, did this writer ever even get to number 3? Does this proposal actually fulfill that list they gave me at the beginning? So that's a way that you can really engage that reader, that reviewer, on this journey of the work you're proposing. As part of that journey, give them navigation tools when you can. What you see here in the top 2 boxes is an example of a key that I put in this proposal where I had a graphic, because there were many elements of this proposal. So we had graphics for each of the different elements, and anytime a paragraph or a section was addressing a particular element of that work, we would put that symbol there. That means that if somebody is like, wait a minute, how does this relate to blah? Oh, we're talking about this element of the proposal. It's right there in a little symbol. A more typical version of that would be really good referencing as far as sections, B21, see D11 for this. Give people a way to flip back and forth and find things in a proposal. These kind of tools are really useful because it can get a lot of pages, and it's a lot to read. Guide the reader through your process. If you have a really complicated set of experiments that you're doing that need to happen in a certain order for certain kinds of samples, show the reader how you're going to do that. You'll see that here in this proposal, we also then even put in those section numbers where they could go and find more information. Oh, I want to know more about active and total microbial communities. Great, that's in section A13. I can see how that relates to this particular sample type. Here's another example of that. Break out your tasks. This could be part of that list that you had before. Make sure that people know exactly what part of your probably rather large work this actually pertains to, so they can keep track of what this actually relates to. Another thing that's worked really well for me in proposals is showing someone how I'll interpret data. There's a lot of emphasis on how are you generating this data in most proposals, and then you get to the last page of the proposal, and then all will be revealed. The singularity will occur. No, show someone what you're going to actually do with that data. What would a graph at the end of it look like, and how would it be interpreted? So here's an example here where I actually said, here's some imaginary data, and this is what it might look like, and this is what I'll say about it if it looks like that. And that can be a really effective way of helping the reviewer understand not only just how you got this stuff, but what you're doing with it at the end. Another thing that's really good is to understand who is doing what when. You've got a lot of tasks, you've got a lot of people working on this thing. Do we know that there's even enough time for all of this work to happen, that it will happen in the right order if it's a nested project so that everybody has what they need? Show the reader all those tasks and how they're gonna proceed through each year of your proposal. Give them a way of understanding that you have actually thought through the process of how this is all going to happen. It's great to have great science ideas, but it's not great to not know how to manage those science ideas. Here's another example where we're breaking it out by particular people and the tasks they're going to do, and we're giving everyone a sense of who's going to do what when, which was really important for this work because there was some really critical field work that had to be part of this. So this is the kind of thing that you can do to really help out that reader, make their job easy, help them know what you're doing. So just in summary, I wanted to, really reiterate, know your program, know the context of that funding program, try to understand what's really needed. Know the PO. I also wanted to send a shout out to Sarah at nasa.gov. This is a general, Sarah is not a person. That stands for Senior Advisors for Research and Analysis. I always have to remind myself what that is. And this is folks who can help you with questions that you have about ROSE's calls and announcements. I know that someone in this group is one of the people who might answer your email, and that's Max Bernstein. And I wanted to especially shout out using this resource for everyone here, because Max was a soft money researcher for a long time, and so he knows the struggle and will be able to help with this. Also learn from your mistakes, be honest about what your needs are, and use your leverage. And then really think about the document, make sure that you're making the job easy for the reviewer. And I think that's about all the sage advice I have.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any questions for Heather? If you have a question, please unmute and ask a question. Okay, let's go to Jim. Jim, let's see if you are able to, if we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, awesome. Yeah, sorry for the issues before. So I will share my screen. Okay. So yeah, I had a few tips for science instrument-based proposals, which really I've spent my career doing. And we've just have a few simple things that we found have helped us over the years. So I just wanted to share a few of those. And I'll be glad to take any questions at the end. A lot of these, I think we've had excellent advice so far. So some of this is going to overlap. Maybe it overlaps a great deal. But these are things we found have helped us, our group, in writing, again, the instrument proposal. Again, if you, someone said, you know, if the key to having good ideas is to have lots of ideas and throw out the bad ones. So the question in addressing, you know, if you want to address a particular science question with a particular measurement approach, is it compelling? I think this is the most important thing. We've written proposals and had them turned down, which was, okay, this is a great technical approach, but the science isn't really that important. You really don't want to go down that road. We've done it. I don't advise it. You want to, again, be able to convince skeptics and the reviewers why your approach to answering this science question is important and is the obvious one to use. Again, as others have said, you want to be able to convince the reviewers, your review panel, why your team is the best team to do this, you know, what unique strengths that you have. And another key question, particularly for measurement proposals, is why do this now? You know, why is this a compelling time to do this? Why can't we wait 5 years to do that? You want to, again, why is this timely? As others have said, you want to be able to work in your proposal as a team. Again, for instrument-based proposals, you need to have to really cover well the science you're addressing, the measurement approach, and the technology that you're using. Obviously, on any of these proposals, you have to do your homework before you even think about writing. If there's feasibility investigations you need to do, if you can swing that through other means, that's important. If there's maybe a preliminary lab experiment that you can manage to squeeze in somehow, that's important. And also, if you're doing, again, measurements, do you have calculations that can support your measurement approach? Some of those take time to spin up, and you'll need to show the results in your proposal. Others have, you know, I've talked about the feedback. I think it's extremely important to have some sort of preliminary discussions with, at Goddard, what we'd call a blue team, giving a talk or maybe a poster presentation about your concept. The reason is it's very difficult to see what you're missing, what aspect of your argument may not be clear to others. And again, it's important to listen to those comments and questions, and it gives you an opportunity to fix things up before you get busy writing. I have just a few other slides. Once the opportunity is announced, obviously you need to finalize your strategy. others have talked about in any of these proposals, you've got a budget. You don't want to exceed, in our experience, the nominal guidelines, the funding guidelines. So you need to ensure that your proposed work is actually feasible within the funding that's being allowed. We always use the NOI as a deadline for finalizing the strategy. So that just gives you a marker on your calendar to shoot for. As Heather just talked about, the executive summary we feel is extremely important. Again, the review panels, we also found, again, if you've been a reviewer, you know you might have 10 of these proposals you need to review. What you can count on is your reviewers are going to read the executive summary reasonably carefully. So again, your elevator speech, if you will, you need to really have everything distilled in a roughly a one-page executive summary, because that's, again, the one aspect of your proposal you can be pretty confident is going to be read. And again, soliciting feedbacks. In the Goddard context, we have what are called blue teams. Again, solicit feedback before you start. Others have always talked about the writing process. Again, looking exactly at the format they're asking for. Again, don't go down the road of trying to do something different than what the call is asking for in terms of formatting, because you greatly risk your proposal being tossed for being non-responsive. Again, if you've been on a panel, you know often you're asked to review proposals when you're tired or you're grumpy, or it's the fifth proposal you've had to read in a particular day. So it's important to be able to tell your story, and again, the executive summary in figures and in tables. Again, the aspects of your proposal you can be fairly confident that even a skim reader is going to look through. Again, on instrument proposals, the plan we go through after that, after we use your executive summary, is try to work up your budget and your work plan. And the reason that might sound out of order, but if you have to buy things, having to look at how expensive are things and how are you going to fit all this in your funding guidelines is really important, and it can be hard to do. It can require iteration. And you may find, we've often found that, oh, we wanted to do this great 10-step plan, and we could only afford to do the first 5 to 7 steps in that. And it's far better to, again, do something that's credible in your work plan than try to overextend yourself and promise you can do things that your reviewers are going to find is not credible. So again, make all that credible and ensure it fits logically within the budget. We always do our figures and tables next. The reason is they're important in terms of the readers and they aren't malleable. And finally, we do the text last because, again, it's easy to adjust. And our approach for the instrument proposals is use it mainly to explain our figures and tables. Again, if you've been in the Goddard process for a while, we have red teams, which are really maybe friendly, but non-advocates to critique the graphs. And that's important. We often find that's really useful advice. We think we've addressed what reviewers might ask for, and we often get feedback we don't expect, but putting that in actually makes the proposal much better. And finally, it's important to realize your proposal may be due at headquarters at a particular time, but your submitting institution office often needs about a week to actually look through it, and they're the one who have to submit it. So the real deadline is not what the deadline in Inspires is. It's really about a week before that. So make sure you're working to that and not to a more optimistic proposal schedule rather. Oops. Okay,
Thank
well,
you,
I think
Jim.
that's all I had. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Jim? Okay, so let's go to our Last panelist, Jacob Richardson. Jacob?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So, excuse me. So again, thanks for inviting me to talk. Before I share my screen, I thought I'd just, go over and reiterate some of the great thoughts that the previous speakers mentioned. One of the biggest ones was sort of Prabhal's first slide of pointing out this sort of descending or declining rate of selected proposals by, a term of percentage of proposals submitted. Over my career at least, but over the last decade or two. So I thought that in, what I might provide to this might be more of a, a proposal review, what happens inside the proposal review room when they have to read, 50 proposals, and many of those are very great proposals, but they're only able to fund 5. And how does that triage work? Because I think that triage, and if you are able to volunteer to be on a proposal panel or a review panel, then you'll sort of see this. That triage takes place in a couple of sort of discrete steps of deciding, whether somebody should take the proposal seriously, and then if the proposal should be taken seriously, then maybe that would be then there's a different process, a different level of effort that the entire panel will put into deciding whether its strengths outweigh its weaknesses. So with that, I thought while I was thinking about that, I thought of people have seen these hierarchies of needs before, so I thought I would show that. I think I have to swap displays here. And I think this should look right. But I created a hierarchy of needs that, again, probably or it certainly does reiterate a lot of what folks have said in the past three speakers have talked about. But I've sort of organized it here in the way that I think when I'm reading a proposal to talk about it to a review panel in the next week. This sort of is what I'm looking for first at the bottom, and then in the middle, when I really get into the weeds of reading the paper, if I am one of the primary or secondary reviewers of it. And then I think the top of this is what I've heard program managers at similar proposal seminars at conferences speak about when they're deciding which proposals actually get funded. So if I start at the bottom of this hierarchy, we've already talked about scope, relevance, budget, and proposal compliance. These things are really important, specifically because if you don't fulfill these basic requirements, then you're making the proposal. You're actually some reviewers will really love you because you've made their job very easy. They don't have to read your proposal at all. If you write a 30-page proposal when you're only limited to 15 pages, then when the proposal comes around, they can say, oh, this is obviously not compliant. We can't seriously consider this with the others, so let's just move on. And then we can spend our time figuring out what actually gets funded. So if you want your paper, if you want your proposal to get read in full and you want your proposal to get read seriously, then avoiding major flaws in compliance and in major flaws in the budget and the scope of this when you relate it to exactly which program you put it into is sort of essential. So if I'm reading a proposal and deciding, whether I like it or not, whether it has merit, just like Jim was saying, there's sort of these two things. There's, we're asked when we're filling out our forms of what are the strengths and weaknesses, we're asked, is this proposal competitive and is it compelling? And those two words are important. If your proposal is competitive or compelling, those will be strengths, and competitive generally means that competitive sometimes might mean that there's proof that your methodology, that your analysis, that your plan will work. And a weakness, on the other hand, is a risk that you have in the proposal or that you didn't include in the proposal, because the proposal review panel is often instructed, or is always instructed, to not write for you. So if they know Heather is great at, looking at rocks and licking them, but, she didn't say she would lick all the rocks, and the proposal requires licking rocks, they're not allowed to say, yeah, but I know that this PI is really great at licking rocks. They'll be instructed to say, well, they'll be asked by the program manager, is it in the proposal? And if they say no, then that's going to be a weakness. So you want to, sorry for picking on you, by the way, Heather. But you want to make as many strengths as you possibly can, and highlight those, just like people were saying. Don't hide them in the proposal, and you want to reduce the number of weaknesses. And some ways to do that, is obviously having a clear plan, and there were lots of great pieces of specific advice for that. I would say have a proof of concept. If you can show with a minimum, just a very minimal, like, hey, I'm a volcanologist and I look at Mars. So it might be, hey, I want to look at every image on Mars, and I want to see is there a volcano there, or is the pit a crater? What I would do is I would take a small, subset of that. I would take a single image or a couple images, and I would do the analysis that I'm proposing to do for all of Mars in a very specific location. Say, see, it works. This proof of concept greatly reduces risk to panels, and putting that in as your figure as an example, but not just a cartoon example, but an actual proof of concept, that really helps if you're going for something like RNA. For instruments, that's similar. You have a picture of your actual widget on a brass board with the LED on that says it's working. So also, if you have a history of success, like I said earlier, Heather's, a world-class expert at licking rocks and saying what they're made out of. Well, if you can cite that you've done that in your proposal, then or somehow say that, then that is really going to be strong and really seen as a competitive strength, because your team is a competitive team to actually do the work. So say you've done all of this, and your proposal is one of the best ones. It's been rated excellent. So there's still a problem. Prabal said at the very beginning that, or showed at the very beginning that, sometimes recently, Rose's proposals have 10 to 15% acceptance rate. That means that the program manager is going to be looking in the end at, 2 or 3 great proposals, and she's only able to fund 1 or 2 of them. So how does she choose your proposal and not, another proposal? And so that kind of goes to the top 2 levels, but certainly, like people were saying, this why now, this impact. If, for an example, if one of the proposals is a perfectly written proposal, the best proposal ever, and it's going to tell us exactly how many craters there are on the moon, that's great. If there's another proposal that's written well enough, but if it's funded this year exactly, we'll find aliens in another galaxy, then the program manager is likely going to choose the one that's more impactful and the one that has to be chosen this year, because you can always count craters on the moon next year, unless Moonfall is correct, but I haven't seen the movie yet, so don't spoil it. So I thought, with all of that, I thought, I also have some tips. I think the 2 biggest ones have already been mentioned. Serve on a review panel, volunteer for a review panel that you're interested in proposing to in the future. That's how you sort of figure out what other proposals look like. It's also how you figure out what people think is a strength and what they think is a weakness. Also, the red team review process at Goddard is something that, I found to be extremely useful. I'll go in, just like what Jim said, we thought we made this really compelling argument, and then we'll get into the room, and our friendly but not, part of our team reviewers will say, well, I really liked, this point that you were making, and they'll completely get it wrong. And then I'll realize that, oh, that means that I haven't actually communicated to these people who are paid to read my, my 15 pages well enough that a person who's not really paid or might be adversarial, certainly will not understand what I was saying. Obviously, the basics have been talked about a lot. I would just point out that for merit, often when I'm in a research proposal review panel, there will always be or there will very often be proposals that specifically write out their methodology. It's a great methodology, but at the end of that methodology, no matter what, they're right. So they'll say that they'll classify something as either A or B, and then they'll see whether or not, you know, everything can be classified as A or B. And that's not quite a real, you know, test of a hypothesis, and that'll end up being a weakness. So you want to make sure that when you're saying like we want to test this hypothesis, you know, there should be a possibility in your methodology for your hypothesis to turn out not as you expected. But that doesn't you know, you might think that's a weakness, but actually, you know, if you can spin it as saying, you know, if we find out that, you know, none of these pits on the moon are actually, you know, impact craters, instead they're something completely different, you know, that could also impact science in a really valuable way to find out that they're actually wormholes on the moon or something. So if you're so make sure your hypothesis is falsifiable, but also if it's false, you know, that can still, you know, be something that points out, that goes to the future, or that advances science. So for the icing on the cake, I think that, you know, people have mentioned the executive summary. I think that, you know, I've been told by program managers and past program managers, this is an extremely important thing because the program managers themselves will actually look at this one page only and they'll reference that. And if they can look at that, you know, one page and they won't remember what's in the rest of the 15-page proposals, if it's just a wall of text and they, you know, when they look at it, they can't remember like, oh, this is the proposal about looking at rocks that I really want to fund, then that makes you a little less competitive. So never hide any details in your 15 pages. And also never hide any details in your CVs. I'm a volcanologist. I'm a planetary volcanologist. I've gotten a proposal back once that said, this is a great proposal, but big weakness, there aren't any volcanologists on the proposal. And I was livid. We had to debrief and the program manager said, yeah, that was a wrong call. But from then on, in my CV, instead of hiding it in, you know, having them figure out what I do by showing them all my papers, instead, or in addition to that, I have an actual little paragraph at the top, 3 sentences at the top saying, you know, Dr. Jacob Richardson is a volcanologist. And that settles it. So I hope I'll never get that weakness again. And if I do, then it means the proposal review panel really did not do their job. And, you know, I could complain, you know, possibly about that. And then if you're reproposing, my last point is if you're reproposing, which you likely are, because, you know, almost, you know, the majority of proposals that get funded, I'm sure, have been proposed before, and they're going in for a second time maybe. You know, the program managers might remember you. And so if you say in your first time around, you know, we're working on this paper and it's going to solve, you know, all the problems that we have in task 1, it's, you know, PI Richardson et al. In prep. And then you put it in the next year or 2 years later and it still says PI Richardson, you know, et al. In prep. The program manager might not see that as a proof of progress and wouldn't, and will think like, oh, well, if I actually fund this, you know, maybe they won't actually deliver on what they're promising anyway. So those are my thoughts, and I'm happy to take questions, but I'm happy to have been part of this and adding to what a lot of others have said so far. So thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Jacob, sorry, I always mix your name and last name. Sorry about that. So are there any questions for Jacob? Or are there any questions for either of the panelists?
Hey, Vivi, can I pop in and say one more thing?
Sure.
Yeah, I was kind of reminded of this during your talk, Jacob, and it's something I meant to mention and kind of forgot or glossed over, which is the importance of figures doing work for you. That they're not just there to break up the text or, you know, be cute or pretty, but they should, you know, show something about the proposed work. I liked your idea of like, here it is with the LED on, see, it works, you know. And I have been on a panel where it was very frustrating that someone had tons and tons of figures, and at the end of reading it, we were all just like, but we don't know what you're doing. Like, why did you waste all this time on these beautiful pictures, and we still have no idea what, you know, what your data set is going to look like. So really make sure they do work for you.
Heather.
Yeah, Vivi, may I offer one other thought?
Certainly.
Yeah, so again, as many people have said, you know, the proposal win rate, even if you're a good proposal writer, might be 20 to 30%. So the main thing, I think, particularly for new proposal writers, is writing proposals is just a skill. And it's important, as others have mentioned, don't get discouraged if your first few don't make it through. It's just normal for the process. And you'll get better as time goes on, and you'll get them through. But it's again, it just takes practice. So just keep at it.
I'll add into the chipping in unsolicited too. One thing that I think is, I think everybody on this panel, we all probably know this and we have this ingrained, but maybe somebody does need to hear this. There's also a level of stochasticity to panels. You can write a great proposal, you can do an awesome job on it, and it can hit basically all the things you need to hit, and then that panel on that day just does not read it the way that you want it to be read, or does not understand it the way you want, or the particular people there, maybe there's somebody who likes, you know, making, I don't know, silly costumes for cats and doesn't want your big dog costume thing, and they're just totally against it. So, you know, because of that, and that is always going to be there. So there's a possibility that you might just, and I know that sounds a little bit discouraging, but that doesn't mean it's always going to happen. It's just another element that goes into this.
I see Amanda has her hands up.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you all for being here and sharing your advice. This has been really helpful. But multiple people pointed out the importance of building a valuable team with a large skill set and showing that this team is powerful. But there are some proposals now that are dual anonymous, so you're not intended to mention who the team members are, at least in the first stage potentially of the proposal. So do you have any thoughts about if there's a way that you can incorporate these ideas of your strong team into that type of proposal, or maybe just forgetting about that element until it's allowed to be less anonymous?
So I'm going through that for the first time right now. I would say that what we're thinking of is this idea of, you know, putting proofs of concept in, you know, in his figure still kind of works, and you can use an action tag caption to say, you know, our team has produced, you know, the results displayed in figure 1, and that works. Another thing is that so it's dual anonymous, but from what we understand, you know, then they will at the end reveal the CVs, and the panel will have, from what I've heard, have the ability to say, yeah, but this team actually is, you know, bonkers, or like, okay, this team actually is capable of what they're doing. So I'm not sure how. So personally, I'm not sure how. You know, that will end up affecting it, but that still means that, you know, even if your 15 pages are anonymous, or anonymized, your CV should still be, you know, talking up yourself as part of the team, and you have to talk, you know, why you, why this, why now. The why you can still be in, you know, in there through proofs of concept and through your CV.
Yeah, I wanted to say, Jacob, this also points to something else important that you said, which is that, you know, don't hide any of your qualifications. Say, this team has 15 years of experience with these kinds of samples and has produced, you know, 46 papers or whatever. You know, you let your experience be known, even if it's not attached to your name or you know, your particular identity, and that can really work for you too.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, in that case, let's thank our panelists for coming here and telling you about their ideas of how to write a good proposal, what makes a good proposal, and what has worked for them before. Hopefully, it would work for you as well. So thank you all.